Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this summit conference on one of this country's key environmental challenges, the future of our precious chalk streams. My name is Rt Howe, patron of the Chiltern Society, and I shall be chairing the proceedings on behalf of the three main sponsors of this event. I'm here at the headquarters of the Chiltern Society, the sponsors being the Society, DEFRA and CRAG, the Chalk Rivers Action Group, but also on behalf of the person who is our principal host today and whom I'm delighted to welcome, Rebecca Pow, MP, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State at the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who will be addressing us in a moment or two. I'm most grateful that so many of you have been able to join us for this event. On the call, we have extensive representation from our three sponsor bodies, as well as a wide range of influential people and organizations with an interest in this important field. Government agencies, water companies, Ofwat, industry leaders, voluntary sector organizations, members of parliament, a university, a Cambridge college, and expert bodies and individuals. Welcome to you all. It's perhaps a commonplace to say that we're prone to take water for granted, particularly here in the Chilterns, where water consumption is among the highest in Europe. And it's easy too to take our wonderful Chiltern's environment for granted until we are pulled up short by a motorway carving straight through an important nature reserve, or a high-speed railway pushing its way through the Misbourne Valley. And last summer, we were again pulled up short when our unique chalk streams dried up for much of their length. That was a wake-up call for us at the Chiltern Society, and the result was that we devoted our AGM conference to the chalk streams crisis. The degree of concern we felt was matched amply by the concern shown by those who made up the panel for that conference, very senior executives from the water regulators and water companies, since when CRAG, under the able chairmanship of Doug Kennedy, has maintained that initial momentum. And I'd like to say how appreciative we are of the continued engagement by DEFRA, Ofwat, and the Environment Agency, Thames Water, Affinity Water, and the Chiltern Conservation Board in the work of CRAG, the result of which is this Chalk Streams Conference. CRAG, the Chalk Rivers Action Group, is about action rather than just words. And the fact that you are all here, headed by Minister Pow, suggests to me that our chalk streams crisis is recognised as a serious problem that we have created but are intent on fixing, and B, that taking CRAG's work onto the national stage with the aim of restoring and taking care of our chalk streams is what we are all here for. We'll be hearing what's been done following the commitments that were made a year ago at our AGM. We'll be hearing what still needs to be done to restore and protect the chalk streams in England. And we'll be hearing, I hope and believe, a renewed public commitment from our main stakeholders to contribute to a national chalk stream action plan and to put their weight behind that plan. So before we get going, perhaps I could just let you know that Dan Turner, our Vice Chair sitting beside me here at the Chiltern Society headquarters, will be managing the technical aspects of this event and will be moderating the discussion. you can submit questions to Dan during the proceedings using the Zoom Q&A function. And we will endeavour to cover as many of those questions as we can within what is inevitably going to be a tight timeframe. We obviously hope that we will achieve clear audibility, but to that end, please could I ask all of you to make sure that you are on mute unless you are called to speak. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to welcome once again Rebecca Pow, Minister at DEFRA, to give the opening address of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord Howe, for setting all that out so very clearly. And I am actually absolutely delighted to be taking part this morning with the Chiltern Society, the Chalk Rivers Action Group and everyone else who is on the call. I was just checking up with my officials, you know, is this normal? Would a minister normally come to this? And quite often it might have been officials, and they're fantastic in DEFRA, as you know. But I specifically wanted to be here myself, as you know, because this is something I'm very, very interested in and want to try and help. So I'm just going to talk quite generally about a lot of the work that is going on and some of the aims and ambitions that I think we should have for the future. So, as we all know, don't really need to tell the people on the call that England's chalk streams are culturally important and globally rare as a habitat. And we are so fortunate, aren't we, that particularly in the south and the east of England, we have 85% of the world's chalk streams. So this is like our rainforest. We are so fortunate. But unfortunately, this precious resource is at risk due to low flows, poor water quality and habitat loss. And there are a whole range of reasons that contribute towards that, but some of which are, of course, climate change and our ever increasing population, which are putting more and more pressure onto chalk streams, both now and into the future. So we all know something does need to be done urgently, and we need to go much faster and much further in reducing the impact of things like unsustainable abstraction and pollution. And that includes from storm overflows and from agriculture. And achieving this step change in improvements is actually everybody's responsibility. We do all need to work together collectively. I think that's a message that's coming over loud and clear from all the conversations I've had so far. Government, water companies, farmers, businesses, and the public to make a difference. And I am absolutely committed to ensuring that we do our part in government. And that need for collaboration is embodied right here at this conference. And I really would like to thank those people who are so passionate, who have been driving towards this and calling for much more action. And that does, of course, include the Chiltern Society and the Chalk Rivers Action Group. And I've met with quite a lot of people to talk about this. And over the summer, I did meet with CRAG. I met with Doug Kennedy, didn't I? And with Fergal, I don't know if he's on the call, Fergal Sharkey, who actually has done so much to rightly so to raise up this issue. But also, I've had a lot of engagement with MPs on this issue. I hope Charles Walker is on the call, because he is certainly an incredible advocate for this, as is Cheryl in the Chilterns. I hope she's on the call. I don't know if she is, but you know, you've got lots of advocates in Parliament who are also pushing. Every time I walk down a corridor, someone seems to talk to me about this. So I know how important it is, not least all the letters I get from constituents and other people's constituents about concerns about pollution. So now I know there have been a number of reports produced on the state of chalk streams. So we've got the evidence. It's not that we need to spend more months and years gathering more evidence. Clearly monitoring is very important and will continue to be very important, which the EA do. But I just think now we need to sort of get a grip of this, and we need to start to change things now and in the medium and long term by working on this. I actually am slightly mortified that years ago I was a broadcaster and a journalist, and I remember going down to a river in Hampshire actually to do a piece. This must have been 25 years ago, on the state of the chalk rivers. And I suppose, I'm slightly mortified that we're still talking about it, which is why, now I've got here as the Environment Minister, we really do need to get a grip of this. So I'm going to now talk about the major issues in turn, but I do want to outline some of the actions we are actually taking and the work we're doing with water companies and other stakeholders to address the damaging impact. And obviously there is a lot more to do, but there are things in place and coming into place that I think will help. So first of all, action to ensure the volume of water abstracted from chalk streams is reduced, partly by helping abstractors to move to more sustainable sources. Our 2017 water abstraction plan sets out how we will reform water abstraction management over the coming years and how this will project into the wider environment. So through the abstraction plan, we expect that by 2021, sustainable abstraction will be achieved for 90% of all surface water bodies and 77% of groundwater bodies. And that is challenging because that's not far away, but that is in the action plan. And abstraction licence changes made by the Environment Agency since 2008 are returning already 16 billion litres of water back to chalk streams every year. And they have removed the risk of a further 14.9 billion litres being abstracted a year. And the Environment Agency's National Framework for Water Resources, published in March this year, sets out the scale of action needed to ensure resilient water supplies and an improved water environment. And the framework embeds a collaborative approach and marks basically a step change in water resources planning, and regional water resource groups who bring together industry, regulators and government will produce a set of coordinated cross-sector plans that address the scale of the challenges we face. And they'll identify the options needed to ensure a resilient water supply and to improve the quality of their local environment, including chalk streams. The Environment Agency are encouraging the regional groups to agree an environmental destination that goes significantly beyond the current expectations, and are asking them to look at protection of 100% of chalk streams as part of this their testing scenario. Once agreed by government, these regional plans will then inform water companies' individual water resources management plans and investment programs. So there will be a very important part of the picture. You'll hear more about this though later from Trevor Bishop at Water Resources East Regional Group, and he'll be talking about what they're doing to develop their regional multi-sector plan. As we all know, chalk streams are supported by chalk aquifers, which are an important source of water. And in the south and southeast, we're particularly reliant on the chalk aquifer for our water supply. And of course, everybody loves water from these aquifers because it comes out so beautifully clean. It's a much sought after source of water. But as well as reducing abstraction, we also need to reduce the water we use. Water companies need to reduce waste. And our 2018 water conservation report target for a 50% reduction in leakage by 2050 and endorses the water industry's existing commitment to this reduction. If you were watching DEFRA questions in the chamber yesterday, there were quite a number of questions about reducing leakage. So that, this is very important. And many water companies are taking significant steps to do this, but obviously we need to go a lot further. The Environment Agency's National Framework for Water Resources set an expectation for water companies' regional plans to reduce demand to 110 litres per day by 2050 to drive down water use. Interestingly, Lord Howe, you probably know this, but our average water consumption is about 143 litres each a day. And I was really noticing this when my children were all at home during lockdown, because some of them spent far too long in the shower. And I'm going to set a timer on them. So that, that is one of the things that water companies are looking towards. And we will shortly be publishing a response to our recent consultation on measures to reduce personal water consumption, including our intended next steps on a range of measures, including the amendment of existing building regulations, water efficiency labelling and smart metering. Now, poor water quality is impacting on the health of our chalk streams, and this is often compounded by low flow issues. The latest water classification results show that improvement in water quality has plateaued in all water bodies since 2016, and this is clearly unacceptable. If we are to achieve the water quality ambitions in our 25-year environment plan, we do need to address this urgently. We need to go much further and faster on reducing the impact from storm overflows. I can't tell you how many people contact me about storm overflows and the issues related to them. But also we need to do more on other sources of pollution, for example, from agriculture. To get to where we want to be, everybody needs to improve how they interact with the water environment. I did meet with water companies quite recently to set out the high expectations of this government for the water environment. Really triggered by these various meetings I've had, and Doug, you know, my meeting with you, you know, really did push me to organising this meeting. And, you know, I thank actually the water companies for attending, because it was a very constructive meeting. And so all of this work that you're all doing, you know, is driving, is helping. And, you know, I particularly outlined that I want water companies to do more on chalk streams, as well as the storm overflows and the leakage issue. And many of them, of course, are already doing a lot of work in many respects, and some of some very interesting projects that I think they'll talk about later. But it is a priority, and we do need to do more. The Water Industry National Environment Programme will see a £4.6 billion investment by water companies in the natural environment between 2020 and 25, so that's significant. And along with the Environment Agency and Ofwat, we're jointly reviewing this programme in advance of the price review in 2024, and there will be our opportunity to focus more on chalk streams. This will deliver greater environmental benefits for every pound invested by water companies to help tackle some of the biggest challenges facing the water environment. As you will realise from my tone, I do want to encourage the water industry to do more, and also to develop innovative approaches which will benefit the environment, including chalk streams. And on storm overflows that I've mentioned a couple of times now, we've already acted there, and we've set up a new task force between DEFRA, the Environment Agency, Ofwat, Consumer Council for Water and Water UK, to set out proposals to address the volume of sewage discharged into our rivers. And just want to touch briefly on the Environment Bill, which will be returning really soon. And it obviously was put on hold for its committee stage because of the coronavirus pandemic and lockdown, but a great deal of work still gone on behind the scenes on that. So actually it's been a very effective use of time. All these measures that I've talked about today will be supported through the Environment Bill, and we're also proposing new legally binding targets focusing on the most significant pressures impacting on the water environment. And the targets under consideration will reduce pollution from agriculture and wastewater, as well as reduce demand. So we're looking, a lot of work's going on these targets, and there's a discussion paper out at the moment, which I'm sure you have seen or fed in ideas to, and we obviously welcome your views and your ideas. So in closing, I genuinely believe that we are developing the right long-term policy. We've got lots of measures in place, and we do need to significantly raise our ambition and do more and build on innovative approaches and a whole raft of measures that will help us. There will be trade-offs because, of course, improvements cost money. And I want to know how much, so that we can make a genuinely informed decision about what it will take and where to prioritise our resources. Actually, Lord Howe, you mentioned that in your view, far too many people take water for granted. And I couldn't agree more, really. It's a really precious asset, and we need to start realising that. This will all take time, of course. The decline in chalk streams won't be reversed in 1 year, but I do want to see quick improvements where we can. And I do welcome the commitments by water companies to reduce or switch off abstractions wherever possible. And I do also welcome industry's collaboration and support for this summer's Water's Worth Saving campaign to reduce water use. And I'm really glad to see so many members of the industry here today. And I hope that we can have a constructive discussion. And I know many people are, as I've said, already working hard on chalk streams. We must do more. I don't just want to sit here defending our existing action. I'm very interested to know what more we actually can do, tangible plans, action we can take, and things we can do now and then in the medium and the long term. So I'll wind up now, and thank you all for joining in and for inviting me. I hope it's clear that I am committed to this, and my officials, I can't stay for the whole event, sadly. I can hear a bit of the panel, but my officials are here. Sally's here, and she's under strict instructions to report back to me, and Harvey's speaking from the Environment Agency. So I very much look forward to the feedback, and thank you so much, and I hope it goes well.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. That's been really encouraging, yeah, it's just great to have you here. Absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. Now I have to, mine is the next bit. So I've now got to work out how to actually get my presentation in front of you, which I hope will happen now. So let's see if I can share my screen. Let me see, and then can you see a presentation now? Yes, that's okay. Good. All right. Well, in that case, oh God, what's this? I've got another window here. Right. Let's put that over there. Thank you. Yes, indeed. So thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Minister, for getting behind our initiative to restore the English chalk streams. Your actions, Minister, since Fergal and I met with you and offering to lead this conference do demonstrate that you see this as a serious issue, and it gives us great heart, and it's very encouraging to hear the many measures that are getting underway. CRAG emerged from the 2019 Chiltern Society Chalk Streams in Crisis Conference exactly 1 year ago. At the time, all of the English chalk streams were under stress, and I recall standing in the bed of the River Ver at Verulanium, many miles from its source, with John Pritchard and Hayden Bailey, while fish struggled for life in a puddle a few feet away. We were aghast at how this beautiful and historic river and the life it supported was being destroyed. It was very late in the day, but at last the crisis was being recognised, so the Chiltern Society's willingness to put on the conference was echoed by the senior stakeholders who readily agreed not only to speak at it, but to commit to taking part in a working group that would initiate actions that would start the process of restoring our precious chalk streams. The CRAG core group, comprised of DEFRA, the Environment Agency, Ofwat, Thames Water, Affinity Water, the Chiltern Society, the Chiltern's Conservation Board and Chalk Streams Project, and NGOs. We met for the first time a month later, and we established our common purpose and started to work on our action plan. The group has met 4 times, but a new, and I'm told, novel phenomenon emerged, which was that government, regulators, water companies and environmental bodies started to talk to each other and work together with a common focus. As chairman of CRAG, I did my best to push things along, and I think that we've all have to be appreciative of the time devoted to it by the senior stakeholders. I'm particularly grateful to Sophie Broadfield, Deputy Director of Water at DEFRA, who must share credit for us arriving at this point, but also to Dan Turner and his admin and IT support and some advice, especially today, of course, to Fergal Sharkey for his regular cold showers of realism backed by his in-depth knowledge of the subject and how things really work. To Jake Rigg at Affinity for his enthusiasm, and Yvette de Gary of Thames Water for their positive engagement and advice, and to all the people who've put their faith in the CRAG project to build momentum. That being said, I feel that along the way I've earned an advanced qualification in cat herding. It is true that CRAG has not involved many of you who know far more about chalk streams than I do, and who might have contributed enormously. But in steering the project, I have insisted on keeping the core group very tight so that rapid progress could be made and talking shops avoided. I understand that some have felt excluded or wondered who on earth this Doug Kennedy thought he was. This is understandable, and I'm sorry for any annoyance it may have caused, but I did my best to talk to people and be open. So your attendance at this conference is enormously appreciated and hopefully marks the start of a concerted national effort backed by government to restore and protect our chalk streams. As for me, I feel that I've waded far enough into these waters, and before I drown in complexities I don't understand, I'm standing down and handing the CRAG baton on to a new national chalk streams group. Inevitably, the outcomes of this year of CRAG have produced some surprises. This summit and many of the new conversations are a revelation, but the building of the CRAG action plan has been sticky, and until water economist Jonathan Fisher got to grips with it, it lacked structure and rigor. His intervention has been invaluable and will hopefully give the new group something solid to build on. For what it's worth, my view of the current state of affairs regarding our chalk streams is that they, along with all our waterways, have suffered from at least a decade of reduced investment and lack of clear policy leadership by government, which has undermined our regulators. And they work within a framework that, as a senior regulator said to me, you wouldn't have designed that way today. Reports produced 20 or 30 years ago state the problems and solutions clearly, but they've been shelved. And the people who really understand the chalk streams and devote thousands of hours to their well-being have often been ignored. So we all hope that the sort of engagement we're seeing today from those who have the power to make a real difference will be lasting. In spite of the best endeavors of its people, our regulatory framework has seen the quality of most of our rivers decline in recent years, and change is needed. We're desperate for point source and widespread pollution to be tackled, which the Minister has covered and dealt with, and and for the rich ecologies and fish to be allowed to return to their natural habitats. As global warming takes hold, these problems will require significant investment at a time when treasury coffers are being sucked dry. So courage and imagination will be needed. But for any effective change to take place, investment must follow planning. The plans being developed within RAPID, once implemented in 15 or 20 years' time, will be vital. But if action is not taken now that will have effect in the coming decade, the English chalk streams are likely to be substantially ruined. Such an outcome will be tantamount to ecocide and heartbreaking to many of us here. It would also go against the government's stated targets and aspirations for diversity and the environment. Interestingly, the government's responses to the Public Accounts Committee on the State of Water Supply and Demand Management were published this week and highlight where leadership and action might start. They conclude that abstracting too much water from rivers and other sources, including chalk streams, can damage the environment, and there are particular risks associated with HS2, heaven help us. The Environment Agency agreed and commits to developing a chalk stream action plan. Perhaps CRAG has given them a head start through its action plan, but it is only a start. Although the problem is recognized to the highest of levels, we're yet to see how DEFRA and the regulators propose to make the predicted 3.6 billion litres per day shortfall in supply, whilst implementing substantial reductions in abstractions from chalk aquifers. Also, the burden of protecting the environment is largely pushed onto the water companies, which is as it should be. Since privatisation, they have sucked many billions of pounds out of the system and underinvested. But their business is to make money for their shareholders, and investment is being demanded of them at the same time as Ofwat's main objective and guiding principle is value for money for customers, which means keeping bills down. It is undoubtedly the case that people who cannot afford it should not have to pay more for their water, but this begs two questions. If the money available is not increasing while major investment is needed, how far can this burden be put upon water companies before they dig their heels in so progress stops? Should low prices apply across the board? Are businesses and agricultural extractors to be treated the same as the poorer public? This may annoy Ofwat, but any new money raised would be designated to pay for rescuing the waterways and not to drive down consumption, about which the Public Accounts Committee said, government has failed to develop a national message to consumers on the need to reduce water consumption and how to do so. This was agreed by DEFRA for implementation by December 2020. However, I do not see this in their commitments within the CRAG action plan, nor have I heard any mention of it for a while, although I have highlighted such a campaign as possibly the low-hanging fruit for actions that CRAG could commit to. Finally, the Environment Agency uses ecosystem service assessments and a natural capital approach to inform decisions regarding resources allocated to maintaining river quality against exploitation or development. This involves an exclusive reliance upon an economic valuation in monetary terms, whilst largely ignoring the non-monetary value of beautiful waterways with rich ecologies. The current paradigm has contributed to the long decline of the English chalk streams, as if they don't measure up in monetary terms, then they are considered as not being viable for investment. Turning this around is something that the agency board could bring about if it wanted to, but nothing in this regard has been offered within CRAG. In fact, apart from the conferences, the EA board has maintained its distance from CRAG and developed devolved its participation downward to people who do not have the power to initiate the changes that are needed. In fact, rather than leading the way in finding solutions, the agency has sometimes seemed to have a rather dampening effect on real progress. So it is to be fervently hoped that this will change and that the new National Chalk Streams body will be allowed to deliver the change we so badly need. I have to believe that Rebecca Pow, Rachel Fletcher, Harvey Bradshaw, Richard Aylard, Pauline Walsh, and other very senior people, when they look me in the eye and tell me that the chalk streams must be restored. But people have heard it all before, and they still don't see the necessary changes being enacted that will secure their future as the rapid program takes place. Sorry, I've lost my slide. Sorry about that. Just finishing off. It's something weird on my system, which won't. Oh God! Just let me finish off, please. No, it won't let me do it. All right. My piggy one was rather good. Anyway, at this event, we've assembled some of the best minds, the most knowledgeable people, the political will, and the stakeholders whose business it is to manage water in a single conversation. Now it is entirely up to us to combine our resources to ensure that this conference is the start of a new and better era for our chalk streams. After all, the Earth's fragile beauty sustains us. Thank you very much. So that ends my bit, and I now have to pass back to Dan, who is going to put online a film by Harvey Bradshaw on the Environment Agency Board.
And I'm going to start with a bold statement, if I may, which is that where there is a strong regulatory framework and the funding to enforce it, we've driven big improvements. So since 1995, some of the worst pollutants in our rivers have been cut dramatically. Sewage treatment plants put out 60% less phosphate and 70% less ammonia into the rivers than they did in 1995. Toxic metals like copper, lead, cadmium and mercury have been reduced, the last two by 50% since 2008. Serious water pollution incidents have been cut by nearly 2/3, from nearly 800 in 2002 to less than 300 in 2019. We've reduced the southern water abstraction on the Test and Itchen, making nearly 200 megalitres of water a day available at the times when it's most needed during dry weather. And we've brought 44 prosecutions against water companies in the last 5 years, securing fines of £34 million and nearly £8 million under our civil sanctions policy for environmental organisations. So where we have the resources to act, we act, and we act decisively, and we will always try and do the right thing. So I want to cover three areas in my reasonably short talk. Those three areas are abstraction, water quality and habitat. So let's start straight away with abstraction, where we have a programme. to restore sustainable abstraction. It is called the Restoring Sustainable Abstraction Programme, so very much does what it says on the tin. We've made changes to 124 licences to protect chalk streams, returning over 37 billion litres of water to chalk catchments. However, we know that 19% of chalk streams and 70% of chalk aquifers still suffer from unsustainable abstraction. Now, to sort those problems out, it requires big, ambitious, strategic solutions. So a lot of the tactical, smaller stuff has been done. So what are we doing to facilitate these strategic solutions? Well, in March, the Environment Agency and partners published the National Framework for Water Resources, and I'm really pleased about this. This for the first time, sets out the picture for water across England, where water is available, where it's needed, and it starts making life a bit easier for water companies to make strategic plans and ultimately investment to move water around the country, to use a mixture of solutions that uses water in the most efficient way. So this kind of national approach will ensure we provide the water as a country that we need going forward, and it specifically highlights 700 million litres of water a day to replace unsustainable abstractions. Big step forward. Who is going to use this national framework? Well, it's going to be regional water resource planning groups who will use it as a planning basis, and they will come up with options, not just the low cost option, but options that balance the needs of all the users, of agriculture, of people, but also the environment. Do we have the kind of regulatory cooperation that will allow all that to happen? Yes, because we've now got a partnership between Ofwat, the Environment Agency, and the Drinking Water Inspectorate. We meet regularly, we get on well. We've developed this beast called RAPID, the Regulatory Alliance, promoting infrastructure development, so that when these plans start coming through, and they are already coming through, we can rapidly progress those plans and turn them from plans to reality with spades in the ground. We know, though, however well that all works, and we will make it work well, nevertheless it's going to be many years before some of these big strategic schemes are brought in. So we need to do stuff in the meantime. And that's why within the current business plans that water companies have, we are securing reductions of around 100 million litres per day in chalk streams by 2025. We're pushing companies to go further and faster on demand management, including reducing leakage from their own networks. But that's going to need all of us to play our part, including the good folk of the Chilterns, where the water consumption per person is around about 156 litres per day, compared with the target of 110. I want to move on now to water quality and then very briefly to habitats. Driven very significant improvements in water quality. Chesham sewage treatment works, for example, on the River Chess, has seen reductions in ammonia of 76% and phosphorus of 74% from its main discharges since 1990. On the River Kennet, phosphate stripping was introduced at Marlborough sewage treatment works, and we've continuously tightened the permits there until permit requirements bring about a phosphate concentration reduction of over 88%. And we're now focusing on the intermittent discharges from storm overflows. We've already required improvements to over 7,000 storm overflows in successive price reviews. A more robust approach for water companies to monitor these storm overflows, how often they operate and when they operate and what conditions. We've now got over 13,000 of them monitored. This information has led to 700 investigations, and a further 200 of these overflows will be improved by 2020. And the wet winter highlighted one of the particular challenges in chalk stream catchments, which is where high groundwater levels lead to infiltration into the sewer network and increased operation of storm overflows. In these areas, we've responded by requiring water companies to create local infiltration reduction plans to sort out this problem, minimising the impact. And we've set up a new national task force between DEFRA, the Environment Agency, Ofwat and Water UK to look at these storm discharges and set out proposals. And we benefit from having an ambitious minister who has put a lot of personal commitment into the environment as a whole, in particular into both chalk streams and sorting out these storm discharges. So we will be providing options going forward as part of this task force. Final part of my talk is going to be just covering habitat restoration. This is some of the most sort of visible local place-based work, and you know, I hope you will have seen it and you will realise how committed our people are to work with communities and partners in delivering this stuff. And we've got another of our imaginatively titled groups, the Water Environment Improvement Fund, where we're providing over £880,000 to these projects, improving chalk streams and chalk habitat this financial year. And through match funding, you can bump that up to nearly £2 million. And we've got a pipeline of further projects, all shovel ready, but subject to the government spending review. Many of the artificial barriers to fish and wildlife have been removed. In the last 10 years, the Environment Agency and its partners have removed over 130 weirs and improved fish passage at more than 420 sites, allowing salmon, other fish and eels to migrate and breed. I'm particularly proud of the test and itching restoration strategy. I mentioned the test and itching earlier, and it won this year's UK River Prize for the Catchment Scale Award. And it's a long-term strategy, and it shows that this stuff is not quick and easy. We need to work together over the long term, which we are doing. It started about 10 years ago, and it's got another 10, 20 years to run. So, closing remarks. My speech was titled Reasons to be Cheerful. First reason, we all care, deeply care, and we have this commitment to see chalk streams returned to the pristine condition we all want to see them. That is, you know, crucial, and that is a reason to be cheerful. We are on the same side here. Second reason, we're making progress. There is some good stuff here. I know we've got more to do, but there is good stuff having been done, and we're already seeing the benefits of this. Second reason to be cheerful. And the third reason to be cheerful, much of what needs to be done we know about. We can make choices. We've now got a national framework. We know about water abstraction. We know the sites that are being damaged by unsustainable abstraction. We know the sort of options that are available or could be available, and we're challenging our friends in the water companies to look at those options. We've got a minister who's committed to high environmental standards and high standards within the chalk stream and chalk catchments. And the minister is playing a leading role. So we know, we know the things we need to do. We know where we've got the regulations and the funding and where we have got gaps, and we're working together on all that. So that is another reason to be cheerful, underpinned by very strong relationships. And a lot of this depends on strong relationships. Another reason to be cheerful. So let us continue the good work that you've set in train. Let's continue to work together, and let us put all our determination into improving these chalk streams, these wonderful rivers, and leaving a legacy of which we can all be proud. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bradshaw. I hope that the hospital appointment goes well, and that we see you back in circulation very soon. We're now moving on to the water company. Water companies, starting off with Water Resources Southeast and Trevor Bishop. We've restricted you only to 5 minutes each. I'm sorry, it'd be so much easier if we had this in a real circumstances. But so, Trevor Bishop.
Thank you, and a very good morning to all of you. In this session, water company colleagues will talk about the important work that's taking place in the here and now. But we also need to think about the long term. If we want long-term answers, particularly under dynamic climate change, we need long-term plans to drive long-term investment to make sure that's sustainable and will be delivered. The water ultimately has to come from somewhere. And as we shift from extracting water from chalk headwaters, we need to rebalance whether we manage demand down or find new sources of water to make sure that we have security supply for the population and the economy in the future. So whilst I know many of you are frustrated by the talk of the long term sometimes, and I understand that, it's essential that we do this in combination with the great work that's taking place in the here and now. And it's like any long journey, you know, the sooner you start, the sooner you get there. So I'm just going to cover a couple of high level points so there's a maximum amount of time for companies to talk about the great work they're doing now. Water Resources South East is all about a long-term plan, a water plan particularly focused on flows and on security of supply. It's a long-term multi-sector resilience plan, not just water companies, and it's bringing together stakeholders, customers, companies, and all under the umbrella of government policy and aspirations for the environment and security of supply. The 2 points I want to raise are very simply these. I'm actually never been more confident in my 30-year career that we will see a step change in ambition for chalk streams and other environments within this planning regime coming through now over the next 2 years. And there's two facets to that. First of all, I think the power of collaboration, of which CRAG has been an instrumental part. But secondly, I think we have to recognise what you might term the Greta and Attenborough factor. I think, you know, the fact that we need to have responsibility for future generations and the climate and environmental emergency is here and now and is likely to only get worse is almost unassailable. So the naysayers have basically disappeared from the scene. I think we all have a common purpose. The second facet of this is, for whatever reason, the Water Framework Directive and other environmental legislation simply hasn't driven the level of environmental ambition we all know intuitively when we look at these chalk streams is needed. And that has constrained the Environment Agency and other regulators' ability to take action to recover those. And it's also constrained investment water companies would like to put into play to deliver those outcomes. So we're going to take a really bold step. We're not just going to do what the legislation said we should do. We're going to volunteer to go further where it's supported by evidence, but also where it's supported by stakeholders and customers where they want to go further. So my old boss used to say to me, if a river doesn't look good, or if it doesn't smell good, or if the fish aren't happy, something's not right and we need to do something about it. So our approach in Water Resources South East is a little more nuanced than that, and we will use the best available evidence, but we will also triangulate that with common sense and the opinions of customers and stakeholders to set an ambition and an investment plan that will deliver what we all know actually is needed. It's not just about what drops out the back end of an algorithm. We have to use our common sense. The second point is more important, but very quickly. Our challenge now probably shifts from setting the right level of ambition, which I am confident about, to making sure that where we have voluntary ambition, it can and will flow through the regulatory process and that it will be funded. Mandatory requirements are relatively straightforward, but when companies volunteer to take action, it's less straightforward how that will flow through the regulatory process and whether funding will follow planning. So it's really important that we work with government, with regulators, we work with all of you to make sure that we can take a more common sense approach to make sure that that investment can and will be delivered so that we've got really long-term sustainable solutions. And we're talking big numbers with impacts on bills, and we need to have a very grown-up conversation about that balance. So that's our commitment to you. Thank you very much. And I'll now pass across to the companies who are going to deal with some of the great work they're doing.
Thank you very much indeed, Trevor, on behalf of Water Resources South East. That's very interesting, very helpful. The investment follows planning message is loud and clear. We now move on to Pauline Walsh, CEO of Affinity Water.
Thank you, Doug. You may notice that I'm not Pauline Walsh. She hasn't had a very radical change to her hairstyle, luckily for her. Pauline's had to send her last-minute apologies. She's had to some really urgent family matters that she's had to attend to. So I'm afraid you're going to have to put up with me. I'm Jake Rigg. I'm Jake Rigg. I'm Director of Corporate Affairs at Affinity Water and sit on our executive committee. And have been part of CRAG all the way through, as you earlier said, Doug. And thank you for your words. So from Affinity's perspective, this is absolutely #1 issue. Over a year ago, Affinity Water's board set its corporate social purpose as not just maintaining high quality water supply, but also actually taking care of the environment. And that was the start of something quite major for us. So much so that at the end of September, on World Rivers Day, we announced from the banks of the River Chess that Affinity Water will end all unsustainable abstraction from chalk groundwater sources. That's a really, really major commitment and a large volume of water and a sea change for us as a company. And to show that we're committed to that and that it isn't just words, and yes, these are baby steps, but it's met with real action, we also voluntarily turned off 2 major groundwater abstraction sites at the head of the Chess Valley that have been points of contention and, of course, ecological harm over the years. And I think this is really important. It's really, really important for ecological reasons that have been described very eloquently already, and I'm sure will be throughout the day. But it's also really important because we're in the middle of an economic as well as ecological crisis, both here and all around the globe. And we need a green recovery, and we need it as soon as possible. In fact, a report published this month by the Social Mobility Commission within the Cabinet Office showed that Chesham and Amersham have the lowest social mobility of any towns in all of England. And that if you're on free school meals in Chesham, and that you were born in 1992, your average income is £6,900 a year. And I think that's really, really important to remember that in the context of this. By reviving our globally rare rivers and by building, maintaining our assets as a water company, as a local economic anchor institution, we can create not just a green recovery, but help people that haven't had the chances that perhaps we've all had, and I've certainly had in life. So Affinity Water, we really want to win the trust of our customers, and to do that, we need to do what we've said. So that's why we started our new approach by turning off sources in the headwaters of the Chess Valley. We're also following up this action with similar switch-offs planned across our supply area. Plans are underway to reduce abstraction or end abstraction at sites associated with the River Ver, Misbourne and Mimram in the next few years. We're in discussion in particular with John Pritchard, who I want to thank personally, from the Ver Valley Society and the Environment Agency, about how we do that in the Ver Valley, and look forward to making further announcements soon. We're also working very closely with Sharon and the team at Revival and North Herts District Council, firstly to pump water into the River Rival, but secondly, and perhaps more importantly in the medium term, to work on further options to end abstraction there. And we've got a visit down with Pauline Walsh, our CEO, down to River Rival in the coming weeks. And I should reiterate that these are real and they're not paper reductions, done in conjunction with campaigners who are all on this call, who have worked so hard for so many years to champion these rivers. But we need to go further than that. Trevor's spoken very eloquently about the work that you're doing. But that's also got to be real, and it's got to be done and started now. So in the last month, we've actually broken ground on a trunk main that is a small part of Supply 2040, which is a major component of the work that Charles Rangeley Wilson and a number of other people have done that led to the proposal called Chalk Streams First. We're taking a really, really active and strong interest in the proposal, as you can imagine. And today I'm asking that all the involved parties, from Rapid, the Environment Agency, Charles, and the water companies, meet so that we ensure that we accelerate progress on exploring this critical proposal, as well as doing the actual physical work that is going on right now in the ground. So a lot of commitment, a lot of hard work, a huge amount of hard work. And I've not even really talked about the actual river restoration schemes that we've got going on across our catchments, or the work that we're doing, the Chiltern Chalk Streams Partnership in particular, in the Conservation Board. I'll let other organisations speak about that. I just wanted to end, and very, very briefly, on what we're going to need from everybody else. So by April 2022, we as a company are aiming to reduce demand for water by 55 million litres per day from this area. This week, in fact, in St Albans, we've started a campaign. And I ask everybody, including the minister, if I can be that cheeky, to go to the website www.getwaterfit.co.uk, that's getwaterfit.co.uk, and sign up to take the challenges that will help us get there. Please promote it on social media, and if you live in the Chilterns or in the area, tell 10 neighbours about it. That would be fantastic. And it's a start. Secondly, we need government support on demand. I was really pleased to hear the words of the Minister. In energy, and I used to work at DEC, in energy, the Green New Deal and then the Green Recovery has seen massive amounts of government support for energy companies to decarbonise. We need that in water so that we can all be helped to use water sustainably. And last but not least, we need support from regulators. For us, a lot of this work started as a result of detailed discussions between Pauline and Rachel Fletcher at Ofwat. But we need to ensure that we have a forward look on the WINEP programme in particular to mandate the changes people know are needed. By doing that, we were able to think much more creatively to minimise impact on bills for customers across the South East, particularly the people that, as Doug said, can't afford it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much indeed, Jake. That's terrific. Very helpful. And now we welcome Sarah Bentley, who is the new CEO of Thames Water. And great to have you on board, Sarah, and we look forward to working with you. So hello, and over to you.
Hi, Doug. Thank you. Hopefully you can all hear me well. I'm at one of our sewage treatment works here this morning. But I just firstly wanted to start by just saying a massive thank you for inviting me here, and more importantly for all the work you do. Minister Pow, you made a comment to thank the teams on the ground. And I will absolutely own up. I'm new to Thames, but I'm also new to chalk streams. But I had the absolute privilege and delight to be on the River Chess with Paul and Graham and some of the team who've been doing some incredible work there in the Chilterns, and I've fallen in love. We were treated by a kingfisher coming to visit our trip, and it's sort of taken me really my breath away in terms of how stunning these environments are. So I'm going to take my kids there next week for a day trip during half term, as long as the social restrictions allow me to do that. But I'm really just grateful to the passion of so many people on this call, but out in the communities for the work that's been done to date. So I just really wanted to touch on a few points, thoughts or observations as I'm just sort of 6 weeks into my new role at Thames. And the first thing I think is just to say that I wholeheartedly support our aspiration to close our obstructions to vulnerable chalk streams. Clearly, we've got to work with customers in the area and make sure they support it, but ensuring that this precious resource is protected is really important. And I'm excited about the opportunities for the River Chess, which obviously it's my first chalk stream I've visited, so it will always have a special place in my heart. But things like our Smarter Water initiative that Helena is running there from Thames, but with the broader community that are all getting involved, it goes beyond regulation and the legalities, and it just looks at what we can do together collaboratively with all the different parties involved to really restore this incredible natural habitat. So I can't wait to hear more about the work that's going on and support that Smarter Water Catchment Initiative. We're also working with partners like Affinity, but also right the way across the sector with my other colleagues that are on the call to have a look at what the standards should be in terms of chalk stream health metrics and really define what good looks like. I think, you know, we've had various targets and ambitions through various different interventions or regulatory bodies, and we can step up and say, what does good look like? And more importantly, how do we get there? And reducing abstraction is a really key part. It's great that I think, I heard that we had reduced obstruction 63% in the Chilterns, which is great. We've got more to do. And we've got ambitions over this regulatory cycle to reduce that by 80%. Now, clearly, we need to look at the whole water balance. And I think Minister Pow referred to that in terms of finding other sustainable sources of water so that the 12,000 people in Tring still have access to clean, wholesome drinking water. So we're investing about £40 million to sort out and remove the horage treatment works so that we can find the residents of Tring alternative supplies of water. So that's part of the equation. I think another part absolutely is making sure that we don't waste water. And leakage is rightly a super important topic right the way across the sector. You talked about the commitment to 50% reduction. Thames are reducing by 20% in the next regulatory cycle, but we need to do more. This is an absolutely vital resource. And I'm not sure that we've really kind of got to grips with the water emergency and the climate emergency. I hear lots of talk about carbon reduction, which is absolutely important. As a sector, we've said we're going to be net zero by 2030, but we're not really talking enough about the water emergency. I will happily offer Minister Pow's children our lovely shower timer so that she can kick them out in 4 minutes. I'm brutal. We have a military operation in the Bentley household with my 5 children that they're in and out very, very quickly. But we need to get people really clear that water is such a vital resource. And I think about the water that's used in the production of goods. It's horrifying how many hundreds of litres of water are used to make a mobile phone, to produce an avocado. And we just don't think about how the water is being used in the same way we think about carbon. I think we've got more to do on that. And if I look at leakage, you know, about 1/3 of it is water escaping from our pipes, 1/3 of it is water escaping from our customers' pipes, and 1/3 of it is consumption that we need to better understand and make sure that we've got a handle on. So we need to make sure that we've got activities across all those 3 spectrums. So making sure that we treat water incredibly preciously is absolutely high on our agenda. And then the 3rd area is really to look at infiltration into our sewers. We've talked about discharges under storm conditions, and it is absolutely clear to me, and I'm passionate, that irrespective of the legalities, discharges for a prolonged period after storm conditions are just unacceptable. They're unacceptable in today's society, and we've got to figure out how to do those. And to reduce those. But it will take a huge amount of innovation because that's the way that the system has been designed, whether that's through combined sewer overflows or just the physical capacity of the systems that have been created. So we need to work out, how do we stop the water coming in that shouldn't be in? You know, we shouldn't be treating perfectly good rainwater. We should be working out how to return that water naturally to the watercourse, and then make sure that we've got the capacity to treat the sewage that comes into our works. There's great detective work that Paul Jennings and the team were doing right the way throughout the Chesham catchment to find out where these sources of water coming in. It is like, you know, being the new Victorian detectives, sort of Sherlock Holmes of finding infiltration. But we've got some brilliant work going on. We've got a huge investment programme, particularly in the Chesham treatment works, as I mentioned, where we'll be increasing the capacity of that sewage treatment work by 30% to reduce those storm overflows. But we all need to do so much more. And I guess the one thing in closing that I'd finish on is, it's really struck me how this is absolutely a team effort. You know, as a water company and a big player in this area, we absolutely and will step up to the right challenges and demands upon us and look to go further than that. But we categorically cannot do this alone. And whether that's working with the local community groups, with the bodies that are represented here, with local councils, regulators, together we can make a difference. And I'm committed to make sure that we play our part in that.
Many thanks, Sarah. That's terrific. The message about water saving, the message about sewage releases, I'm absolutely delighted to hear. I know I've met your predecessors, and I'm afraid the first time I met them was at the Aylesbury sewage leakage, which went over a very long time. So the fact that things have changed and are changing is very, very good to hear. You're very welcome. I now welcome Lawrence Gosden, who was at Thames Water, is now at Southern Water. So hello, Lawrence.
Hello, Doug. Good morning, everybody. Well, just being very straightforward about things from our perspective, we really, to the entire heart of our company, recognise that our performance and our recent performance is just not good enough when it comes down to the looking after this precious environment. But we are taking very bold steps to improve that through a whole series of targeted investment programmes and, importantly, greater transparency in that in that performance improvement. But in particular, we are also looking to roll out a radical digitally enabled technology transformation, which will help us to eradicate pollutions in the long term by 2040, which is our goal. Now, we were one of the first water companies to publish a pollution incident reduction plan. We were straight out of the gate on that. And over the next few years, by 2025, that plan, we are aiming to reduce pollution by 80%. So well on the way towards zero by 2040. And that plan will really focus on the most sensitive areas, such as chalk streams and triple SIs, a huge focus of that plan. We really understand the strength of public concern about storm overflows and share that entirely. The potential impact on chalk streams has been mentioned by many people today and is there to be seen. Action across our entire region includes improving monitoring, enabling us to manage flows better, critically reducing the amount of surface water entering that network is a big part of this. So therefore, our action around longer term drainage and wastewater management plans and investing in sustainable urban drainage, and for example, in projects we've completed in Portsmouth, really help to take water that shouldn't be in the sewage system and keep it in the natural environment where it should be. Now, we entirely support a collective and indeed a holistic effort that is required around new developments, and that is across regulators, government and water companies. But we really do need to tackle the requirement for sustainable drainage to be built as required on new developments, preventing that surface water from entering the foul and combined system and providing that overflows that we all want to avoid. Now, from a water perspective, we are very committed to and entirely support the work of Water Resources South East, and our own water resource management plan is critical to providing resilient water supplies and protecting the environment. And that really includes, of course, our precious chalk streams. Our Water for Life Hampshire programme will revolutionise the way we source, treat and supply water right across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, protecting the Test and the Itchen chalk streams. Now, lastly, it's not all about our big macro investment programs right across our region, but it's also about how we locally work with environmental groups and campaigns in our local community areas to really support those communities, help improve the environment. And we're investing £9.5 million in a suite of environmental monitoring and improvement projects to do just that. So this is a national, it is a regional, it is a local level that is joining forces here. Now, it's clear that we've made some great progress, I think, across the sector and across all of the companies and government and regulators. But there is a lot more to do, and we are entirely committed to playing our part in improving things for the future.
Thank you very much indeed, Lawrence. That's terrific and good to hear of the progress at Southern Water with the best chalk streams in the world in your domain, in your area. We'll look forward to seeing all that unfold. We'll now move on to Peter Simpson of Anglian Water.
Hi, Doug. Well, I'd hate to contest that you've got the best chalk streams in the world down in that part of the world, because I guess my opening point is I'm really pleased to be here because we've got 28% of English chalk streams in the Anglian region, and they matter to us. They really matter to us. And it's an area, I grew up in Norfolk, and we've got some amazing chalk-fed streams and indeed rivers of international importance. And our role as custodians ultimately of those streams and of the environment more generally is really important. And I guess just in a few minutes, I wanted to say a few words about, I think, where we've made some good progress, but that is not to underplay the fact that there's an awful lot more that we could and should be doing together. So good progress, some examples of that. I think in recent years we've seen a change in the point at which we take water out of the River Wensum, which is a very significant chalk-fed river that supplies the city of Norwich with water. That scheme cost £36 million, but ultimately it protected some very, very vulnerable parts of that particular chalk-fed river. But on the other scale of things, we've also done a lot of work developing treatment wetlands, and we've got a project that we started in the west of Norfolk on the River Ingle, a chalk-fed river there, where we've been, rather than carrying on with traditional approaches to wastewater treatment, sewage treatment, we've introduced treatment wetlands, which have really created and highlighted the biodiversity potential of chalk streams. And we've got many more of those coming through. So almost like two different perspectives, one where we are protecting a chalk-fed river by moving the point of abstraction and making a significant investment to achieve that, and another other ways in which we can work with chalk streams and rivers to actually enhance them, particularly in terms of biodiversity. But for me, the ambition is really important, and over the next 5 years, there's an awful lot that we've got in plans to do. So coming to the point about abstraction, as a company, we will be reducing the amount that we take out of the environment by 85 megalitres a day. Most of that is essentially protecting chalk-fed streams. And how are we doing that? How are we accommodating that reduction? Well, we're doing it in two ways. We're reducing demand. So reducing the demand for water. How are we doing that? Well, we're putting in 1 million smart meters in customers' houses, and we're working with customers on behavioural change programs to actually bring down the amount of water that each of us is using. And if I can work out how to get my kids out of the shower more quickly, that might help. And Sarah, I might come to you for some advice on that, because I've not managed that one yet. But there is a serious point about behavioural change, and smart metering, we know, has had a very significant impact in trials we've run, and we're putting 1 million smart meters in over the next 5 years. So that means 50% of our customers will, at the end of the 5 years, have a meter, and it'll be a smart meter. We're also reducing leakage, again, to Sarah's point earlier, in Anglian's case, going down by another 30 megalitres a day. So we might have one of the lowest levels of leakage in the industry, but that isn't good enough. We need to take leakage down even further. So our ambition is to take it down another 30 megalitres a day. But reducing demand isn't the whole picture either. So we've got to integrate our supply systems better than we have. So we're in the process of building a 500 kilometre, so a 500 kilometre large diameter, so typically a metre diameter pipeline from right up in the north of the region, right the way down into the east and into the southeast, where there's particular vulnerabilities, and we're interconnecting it with many of the existing groundwater systems, which will give a whole series of different options moving forwards and enable us to stop abstracting in a whole series of areas where currently that's the only source of supply for customers' water. So that's an enormous project. That's not pie in the sky. That's not something that's going to be done in 10 years. It's something we're doing right now, and it has to be completed within 5 years. And that's all part of a huge program. And just in the next 5 years, we've got an environment program which is sort of £800 million, so a significant investment. The point that Trevor was making right at the beginning, and it's sort of been picked on as everybody's talked about the regional planning for water. We all agree this is really important. It's very important that we not only look within our regions themselves to see what the balance is between all the users of water. In our region, obviously, we have agricultural demand for water, power demand for water, public water supply demand for water, the environment's demand for water. It's very important we look across all of those as we develop our plans. But it's also important that we look across boundaries and we think about it between us. So just to give an example, Water Resources East is developing its multi-sector plan, and many of the things that Trevor said before are common for that particular group. It's a very broad group, lot of organisations involved, not just the water companies. It involves agriculture, it involves lots of NGOs, it involves the power sector, everybody who's got an interest in water.
Peter, can you sort of wind up in the next minute or so, please? If
I
possible?
will do indeed. But it's also about how we can actually transfer water out of one region to another region. So one example of a rapid scheme which is being developed that Harvey alluded to earlier is a reservoir in South Lincolnshire which will actually largely be to supply affinity water. So 2/3 of the water will head ultimately down to benefit affinity, and obviously into this direct geography we're talking about a third being used by Anglian in our geography. So lots of opportunity, lots of ambition, quite a lot already been done, quite a lot going to be done in the next 5 years, but also some really strong and clear collaborative planning going on for the future.
Many thanks indeed, Peter. That's very interesting, very good to hear. I've spent quite a lot of time in Norfolk producing a book on Norfolk landscapes, and good to hear about that, all that happening there. Moving on now, we've got Jonathan Fisher, who has been, as I said, has been greatly helpful, a water economist on our action plan. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Doug. I've moved from to an iPad now. Can you hear me all right, please?
Hear you.
Fine, thank you. Yeah, just to say quickly, next slide, please, Dan. Is that's working?
Yeah, carry on, Jonathan. I'll get them up in the background.
Fine. Okay, well, I welcome the many positive statements made this morning, which are very encouraging. As Lord Howe said at the start, that needs to be supported by substantive action. I'd also like to pick up on what Lawrence usefully did, which is we need to appreciate the problems of the current situation. And I think this is particularly the case of the agency's board. The river classification came out last month, but it was 9 months late. So they've got to get their skates on, so that they don't backslide on delivering the processes for proper implementation of the Water Framework Directive. I'm also afraid to say that the catchment approach to manage engagement locally is not working well. I wrote to our host of the Lee catchment asking what he was going to do about commenting on the classification and the future consultation on the next river basin plan, and I got a resounding no answer yet. So what we've done in the next couple of slides is to set out 10 commandments from the action plan. And the first one, Doug, if you can next slide, is to get back on track. And if the next slide is up, I can't see anything, but I'll carry on. We basically need the agency and DEFRA to engage in meaningful consultation at both national and local level for the river basin plan, which are due next year. And that requires the 5 key matters that I hope are on the slides. I can't actually see them. I'm just going to flag up one of them. Basically, we've had good discussions with Affinity, and their good program of abstraction reductions in WINEP will tackle 18% of the sustainability gap. So the agency and DEFRA need to work out what and publish the options for the remaining 82% and put flesh on those options that Harvey says he has, and in the minister's action plans that the Minister Pow rightly developed. That needs to be done at the short run for the next river basin plan due next year, and in the medium term for the future river basin plans, future rounds of river basin management plans and periodic reviews, and then the long term. And that brings me on to the final slide, please, Dan. Now, what we need now is substantive additional measures and resources to achieve real improvements. And I'll just flag up on the one in number 4 there. Basically, as the Minister rightly said, there are increasing pressures from increasing population, and that causes increasing problems for our chalk stream. We've got tens of thousands of households planned in local plans for the catchments for our chalk streams. And what happens at the moment is the local planning authorities ask the water companies, can you supply the water? The water companies have a duty to do so, so they duly say yes. And the local planning authority just ticks the box and end of story. And the same happens with the inspector. That's just not good enough. And basically, you need the companies to have the right and the risk to set out to the local planning authorities what are the risks to water resources and incentivize the developers and then households to limit consumption at the time that is the most cost effective to do so. And also, as Lawrence said, to also promote SUDs. And I would like to propose that there is developer contributions paid by developers to water companies to cover the costs of providing the water resources for those houses and treating the sewage that will be generated. And finally, on the question of incentives, it's evident that there is a need for abstraction charges in unsustainable catchments. They are justified in their own right in terms of the importance of impacts on chalk streams that's been flagged up today. And also they provide revenue, and many comments earlier about the importance of resources and funding, and the fact that we often hear measures that are all considered worthwhile just hit the buffers of lack of resources and funding. And those charges would provide a revenue stream. And I'm ex-Treasury, and there are ways of getting that approved by the powers that be. I'm happy to discuss that in Q&A or in CRAG's further work, along with the other measures we got there. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thanks
Thank you all.
very much indeed, Jonathan. Sorry for the technical problems. And now the second contributor to the NGO section is Tom Beeston, Chief Executive Officer of the Chiltern Society. Okay, Tom?
Yes, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, everybody. I'm really impressed with the commitment being made by everybody. It's absolutely fantastic. It's been the sort of story that we've had over the last 12 months of when we sort of came to start this journey. And I'm just absolutely bowled over by everybody's commitment. My sort of job, though, really is to tell my members, the 7,000 members that belong to the Chiltern Society, to tell my neighbours, I live in the Chilterns, what's happening, to tell the businesses I talk to tell the politicians I talk to what's really happening. And for all the positive energy that I've got this one map up here, and it frightens me that our chalk streams really are not in a good status. These are important factors. They're indicators of what's happening on climate change. They're indicators of what's happening on biodiversity. I don't have the presence and the power of Greta or Attenborough, but really this is the same story. And I've been asking all the way through for the last 12 months for one thing and one thing alone, and that's a one-pager in plain English with no acronyms and nothing of what is actually going to happen. And I've been asking that of 3 players in this game. I've been asking that of my colleagues in civic society, the charities and the small groups across the Chilterns, the amazing people. I've been asking the businesses for that, the affinities and the Thames Waters for that. I've been asking all the regulatory bodies for that. And we're getting very close to having that, I'm really pleased to say. But I am not convinced yet that we're doing enough to actually turn those rivers that are all red and orange, not in a good state or whatever, on that thing. So I do ask that we continue this commitment and we remember that we can pat ourselves on the back, we've done great things, but we need that commitment. And I really do want that one pager. Our copy deadline for our magazine that goes out to all the businesses in the Chilterns and goes out to all the households in the Chilterns is the 1st of January. And I really want that to get into that. When I talk to my neighbours, when I talk to our members, and when I talk to everybody, I tell them this is actually quite a simple problem. I tell them to create the policy, to create the delivery change that happens. There are only really 3 players. There is us in one corner in civil society, the environmental charities, the great people working on the chalk streams. I mentioned people like Paul, who's working on the chest just down the road, a stunningly good farmer, and actually really committed to this. And Paul is one of 100 people I should be mentioning. And they're really doing great work on the ground. But when I talked to my neighbour this morning, who would call himself an environmentalist, he's still not got the message that he needs to reduce his water consumption. That needs to get there. When I look then at the second group of people that have to do something in this arena, I look at business, and in particular for me in the Chilterns, I'm looking at Thames and Affinity Water. And I'm really, really shocked to be able to say that Jake from Affinity, that you've seen speak earlier, and his chief exec, Paulie, and Yvette from Thames, I really see being part of the team that we have. I see them actually being part of what we're doing in the Chilterns. They are an absolute credit to their organisations. The amount of work they've done over the last 12 months and the commitment we get from them is fantastic. They know they have to do an awful lot more. They know that they've got to convince their boards to do more, but they're doing it. And I feel like we are supporting things to happen here. But when I talk with those people in civic society and the geologists and the experts around us and the people getting their boots dirty on the ground, the Allen Beaches from the Chiltern Conservation Board Chalk Stream Project, and when I talk to my friends at Affinity, particularly behind closed doors or Thames, they do tell me in one thing is that this is a highly regulated industry. It's regulated not just in its price, but in what it's allowed to do legally. And we all know when we walk down there, when I walk down the chest, I'm not just putting my face mask on because of COVID, I'm often putting my face mask on because of the stench from the pollution that's going down there, and that has to change. And we know it has to change. We've known this for 10, 20, 30 years. We do not need another report. We do not need another consultation. The problem is bad and we have to act. If I look very simply at water, like I look at carbon, like I look at biodiversity, if we don't have water, we do not have an economy. So what I'm really pleased about today on the third corner of this is that our government actually looks to be taking the leadership that it needs to take. It controls what is happening. And I'm so pleased and so delighted to see a minister come here and actually stand in front of us, the great, the good, the small, and actually tell us and make a commitment to doing things. But I would like to bring that time frame forward and say that we have to have water balance, not in 20, 30, 40 or 50 years. We have to have it by 2030, like we have to be carbon neutral by 2030. So again, I ask for one thing. I want to see all our chalk streams, not just in the Chilterns. I've got family in Yorkshire, I've got family in Lincolnshire on the Lough, and I go and pick watercress down in Hampshire. So I want them all done. I don't want any more reports, any more consultations. Government, civil society will do all we can. Please get the message across to our consumers. And Thames Infinity, I know you promised to do the same. I'm sure I've missed loads that I'd like to say, and I'd really like just to ask Alan from the Chalk Streams project, who knows these subjects, and we work alongside closely. Alan, is there anything I've missed?
Thank you, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to just sort of make a comment really about some of the local groups on the ground and what they're doing to deliver and how they might be facilitated to deliver more. The Environment Agency's Challenges and Choices consultation recently, part of the River Basin Management Planning process. For the Thames region or the Thames River Basin, the opening introduction to that document provided a stark piece of realism. It states that at the current rate of progress, it will take over 200 years to restore Thames River Basin rivers to good ecological status. So clearly what is needed is action and action now. And it's been really pleasing to hear some of, a lot about some of the action that is now being taken and the greater focus that's been placed on chalk streams. For our part, local groups, charities, local organisations such as the Chiltern's Chalk Streams Project, which I manage, and catchment partnerships, we do a lot for chalk streams on the ground, or our rivers on the ground, and we're ideally placed because we're well established, we're passionate, we're knowledgeable, and we're incredibly cost effective at what we do. Not only that, but we have a long track record of delivery. The Chalk Streams project has been delivering for chalk streams for over 20 years. But they're keen to do more, and I, for one, stand ready to do more, and indeed have developed a business plan for the Chalk Streams project to do that. But in order to do that, we need to be properly supported and resourced. Too often we are hamstrung. Groups like the Chalk Streams project, the catchment partnerships, are hamstrung by the piecemeal nature of funding made available, and the fact that there's an abundance of red tape and bureaucracy associated with these pots of funding. So we spend a lot of our time looking over our shoulder or raising funding to keep our own posts going, let alone to actually deliver on the ground. So what is needed is appropriate levels of resourcing. We can help support water companies. We can help support the Environment Agency, DEFRA, and the government to deliver more, but we need their help to do so. To that end, the Chalk Streams project has developed a business,
very short of
and
time.
I'm very pleased to say that that some of our partners have invested in that business plan to enable us to expand and deliver more. I really fervently hope that other partners will do so too, to enable us to help contribute to restoring our chalk streams. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Alan. That's got a very strong message. Alan's been working, especially in blood on these, for 15 years, and does some sterling work. So we'd love to see that happen. Now, the next is a signal event, because I'm now handing over the baton of the momentum that CRAG created and our action plan to Charles Rangy Wilson, who is going to be chairing the new National Chalk Streams body. So Charles, it's all yours. Good luck, mate, and I wish you all fortune and strength.
Thank you, Doug. I've been asked to talk today about the next steps for English chalk streams. But as I'm always reminding myself with regard to river restoration, you can't make good decisions about where you want to go next with your river if you haven't spent time thinking about how it's got to be in the state it's in. Chalk streams have been shaped and reshaped over the centuries, and we need to learn from their past in order to better determine their future. So I hope you won't mind if I spend a few minutes talking about next steps by talking about past steps, because there's a lot of frustration about how little progress we've made with regard to looking after our chalk streams. I want to offer some thoughts on why we are where we are before articulating ideas of what we need to do next to make progress. I fell in love with chalk streams many years ago when I was given a Collins Encyclopedia of Angling and found in it a picture of the River Lambourne, an ordinary little picture, nothing special, but one that captured that blousy English beauty of a summer's day beside a brimful chalk stream, and which also captured my river-obsessed childish imagination. 10 years later, I moved to Dorset for my first job and fell in love with the wet reality of chalk streams. I started to fish them and to restore bits of them. And this is where my exploration of the past begins in the summer of 1995. Every day on the way to work, I drove over a little chalk stream tributary of the Stour called the River Tarrant. I got to know it very well. I rented half a mile of fishing from the farmer and would spend an hour or two there whenever I could. But this particular summer, it started to dry, from the top down and from the bottom up, leaving a section in the middle full of magnificent trout caught in the trap of their drying river. The National Rivers Authority didn't have the manpower to do much about it, but they did lend me some nets. So as things got critical, I went down there with my wife, Vicky, and together we netted the pools, rescuing the trout into buckets, which we then put in the boot of my car and drove as fast as we dared down to the River Stour. I knew they would find their way back up when the springs broke in the winter. Over a long and tiring week, we rescued hundreds of trout against the clock of a vanishing river until on the Saturday evening we had to stop, leaving one long pool only half done. It was late and getting dark, and we were totally exhausted. Vicky was heavily pregnant after all. We'd get them the following morning, we thought, but by the next morning it was too late. The pool had just vanished through the drying riverbed, leaving dozens of trout dead and dying in the mud. The River Tarrant had 2 abstraction stations on it at the upper and lower ends of the river, exactly where the epicenters of the drying process had begun. I knew that abstraction had killed those fish, and I wrote angry letters to all and sundry saying as much. Vicky wrote an article in the Field. But in those days, the official line was that abstraction didn't actually cause chalk streams to dry up, or not enough to make the difference. It was a very dry summer after all, and chalk streams do dry naturally. The impact of abstraction was insignificant in the general scheme of these natural processes. The Tarrant was a winter born anyway, blah, blah. Notwithstanding that I didn't buy any of this, I did know that pulling trout out with nets and driving them around in buckets was not a sustainable way to protect them each time we had a dry year. I also noticed that a pond beside the drying river had remained healthily full all summer long, simply because it was deep enough to pick up the groundwater that had deserted the perched riverbed. So in between berating them about abstraction, I brokered a grant of £5,000 from Wessex Water to excavate beside the river a series of interconnected groundwater ponds into which I would put the rescued trout each summer, and from which they could swim back to their beleaguered chalk stream when the spring started to flow again. It was a no-brainer scheme that couldn't have but worked. But before I could get permission, the NRA, which by then might have become the EA, compelled me to commission a feasibility study, including groundwater modelling. This study used up all my Wessex Water grant money and concluded that further research was necessary. I learnt a lot that summer about the issues facing chalk streams, the 3-dimensional issues in the landscape, and the 2-dimensional issues of the bureaucratic process, which tends to complicate simple solutions to the point where nothing happens. You may have started to see how this story is a neat parable for explaining why 25 years later, we are sadly still railing about unnaturally drying chalk streams. We have long denied the cause of the problem, and then we have made the discussion of the solutions needlessly complex and opaque, the latter sometimes to aid the former, and so it goes on. In about 2006, I published a book on chalk streams and drove through the Chilterns photographing them. With the exception of the Chess and Wye, I found mostly dry furrows in the landscape. In 2008, I helped WWF formulate their campaign against the over-abstraction of chalk streams. We called it Rivers on the Edge, and I wrote a speech in which I said that our chalk streams were our burning rainforests, our melting ice caps. I hoped that idea would resonate, and it did. Not so much, however, that in 2017, I was able to walk beside a river bean with water in it. Whitehall was as dry in 2017 as it had been in 2007, and 1997, no doubt, as was the Here's the Mimram, the Misbourne, the Upper Chess, the Ver. Will they still be dry in 2027? Dare we hope not? Because we have made some progress. The River Piddle dried often in the late 1980s, but now it flows all the time, and as a result, because it was never dredged, parts of it are as close to chalk stream perfection as you can find. The River Og was bone dry when we campaigned for Rivers on the Edge. It flows again now. Abstraction reductions have been made on the Chess, the Ver, the Darranth. There are trout in the River Wandle when 20 years ago there weren't. Some of our urban chalk streams are as clean as they have been since before the Industrial Revolution. That doesn't mean they're as clean as they should be, but it's progress. River restoration is no longer the practice of a few nutters in smelly waders scratching around for cash, causing trouble. It is a credible activity, often funded by the government to the degree that we can attempt projects now which were utterly beyond our dreams 20 years ago. So there has been some progress, and there is also now, I sense, a shift in mood. A simmering impatience articulated by passionate campaigners has catalyzed what, on the face of it, appears to be a genuine political will to turn things around once and for all. Nature and the environment are no longer niche concerns. For my part, I've been beavering away, quite literally sometimes, on my local chalk stream in Norfolk, and now I've been asked by the Rivers Trust and Environment Agency to chair a new national chalk streams restoration group, whose first task is to write a national chalk stream restoration plan. Over the years, we've had a few of these. We've had the 2004 report into the state of England's chalk streams. Then in 2009, we had WWF's campaign, Rivers on the Edge, followed in 2014 by a reinvestigation of the state of England's chalk streams. We've had the Angling Trust's Chalk Stream Charter and now CRAG's highly laudable action plan for chalk streams. All good work. We kind of need another action plan like we need a hole in the head. What we really need is action, as everyone is saying. So if there's a bit of space for something that will help to catalyze that right now, then I'm more than willing to have a go. Probably because of that 1995 experience on the Tarrant, I have, if nothing else, an almost tireless desire to turn complex, apparently intractable issues into simple and assailable ones. I passionately believe when you can understand the problem in a common or garden way, you're halfway to fixing it. So speaking from a personal point of view, my first aspiration when it comes to next steps for English chalk streams will be to address the problems and describe them and their solutions in simple terms and in plain English. My parallel aspiration will be to harness the grassroots passion of local groups fighting the corner for their local rivers and empower them with knowledge and support. I will be reaching out to them all over the next few weeks. At the other end of making things happen, DEFRA has confirmed that the new panel will feed its findings into the Strategic Regulators Group, a cross-regulatory forum which shapes long-term strategic objectives and makes decisions for the future water industry sector. This means that we will have a clear way to influence future policy and activity. Our end goal is healthy chalk streams we can all be proud of. It's really very simple. There are three things that go to make a healthy chalk stream: water quantity, water quality, and good physical habitat. They are all interrelated, of course, and each one is shaped by the other, mostly in the order I have just outlined. The fundamental is water. Without water, you have no river. And in the case of chalk streams in London's orbit, we frequently have no river, or such diminished rivers that they are shadows of what they should be. That ought to be such an obvious scandal. But one big reason why we have never quite cracked this abstraction nut is because the whole dark art of assessing whether a river is or isn't damaged by abstraction has been hidden for so long behind smoke and mirrors. I would like to see us democratize the knowledge and analysis. It's not actually that complex. And knowledge presented in such a way that it is easily comprehensible by the ordinary people who care passionately about their chalk streams is what gives us the power to effect change. Right now, you try getting hold of, let alone processing the information that will tell you the extent of the abstraction in a given valley or the effective rainfall, or you try to fully understand the official assessment of whether a given river is over abstracted or not, or even what actually defines unsustainable abstraction, or how that definition actually shapes abstraction regulation, and you'll be set for a head-mangling exercise. You'll trawl for hours through impenetrable papers and jargon, trying to get your head around environmental flow indicators, river types defined by hieroglyphic code, and maps of abstraction sensitivity bands and EFI compliance that have all the resolution of a Space Invader screen from the 1980s. Instead, or in addition, why can't we have a simple national audit of the abstraction regimes in all the English chalk streams presented online in an effortlessly comprehensible way, alongside the effective rainfall data for each river valley, so we can see exactly what is coming in from the sky and exactly how much of that is not going out down the river? That would focus the debate because it would put knowledge on both sides of the table. And how about, in addition to the highly laudable but somewhat piecemeal abstraction reductions we have seen of late, giving ourselves a great big endorphin rush of an early hit by just getting on with the total no-brainer proposal of chalk streams first? Chalk streams first would amount to a regional cessation of groundwater abstraction in all the chalk valleys of the Colne and Lee, a renaturalization of flows across the most beleaguered chalk stream region of all, and for only a moderate loss to overall supply. It would offer us a model of how to do it elsewhere. What's not to like? As for water quality, remember that it took the great stink of the Thames to persuade the government of 1858 to invest in adequate sewer infrastructure.
We want to allow some time, sorry Charles, we want to allow some time for questions.
Yeah, okay, well I'll just try and go a little quicker. It was 15 minutes, or 14 rather. A shame then that we cannot, as Hercules might have, simply divert a river of combined sewer overflows through Parliament. It hardly needs saying that the overuse of CSOs is a scandal. Further afield, there are vast and obvious problems to address in simple, actionable ways. There is mounting evidence of the impact diffuse agricultural pollution is having on chalk streams. And when it comes to invertebrate health, the Water Framework Directive appears to have shifting baseline syndrome built into its assessment criteria. We need much higher standards for chalk streams. We need enhanced environmental protection that reflects their global rarity. We need to educate farmers with independent confidential advisory programs backed up by warning and litigation if necessary. Finally, and onto familiar territory for me, we need to lift our game when it comes to the physical restoration of chalk streams. The degree to which they were dredged and the debilitating impact that has had on the bodily health of our chalk rivers is poorly understood and massively underestimated. A naturally meandering river with an intact gravel bed and in touch with its floodplain is miles more healthy than a canalized, entombed river, even if all the other factors are constant. Wouldn't it be great, and I'm issuing this as a challenge knowing that Affinity Water has already risen to meet it on the River Chess, if every water company were to adopt a chalk stream as an exemplar of what is possible with a complete catchment-wide rehabilitation, addressing that simple trinity of water quantity, quality, and habitat as imaginatively and ambitiously as possible. These Trojan horse schemes would set the bar, showing beyond doubt that we can, with will and determination, find room for wild chalk streams in our busy landscape, and through that, enrich our lives immeasurably. Thank you.
Can I, first of all, thank all our speakers for their tremendously informative and illuminating contributions. Thank you all. We are restricted for time on the questions, but the questions have been flowing in during the course of the conference. What I thought I'd do to start with is group a number of questions, which you won't be surprised to hear fall under the heading, the broad heading of abstraction and pollution. And I'm also going to preface my summary of those questions by saying that the tone of them, maybe also not surprisingly, has been also quite challenging to our speakers. I think that it's appropriate if I ask Sally Randall at DEFRA, if she's with us, to take this first question. Ashley Smith of Windrush Against Sewage Pollution, Graham Roberts, the chair of Upper Itchen Initiative, my colleague in the Lord Chidgey, Tom Beeston, as you've heard from the Chiltern Society, have all struck a note of skepticism in their questions and comments about DEFRA and the Environment Agency. Specifically, that those bodies have simply not prevented the water industry continuing to abstract inappropriately and pollute rivers. Mark Lloyd, the chief executive of the Rivers Trust, referred specifically in his question to the agricultural sector and the enforcement of agricultural relations, pointing out that agriculture is the largest source of pollution in our rivers. Why have there been no prosecutions, he asks, and why has the Environment Agency funding in that area been cut over the last decade? So I hope it's not unfair of me to ask Sally at DEFRA, Sally Randall at DEFRA, if she can perhaps cut through the note of skepticism that those questions contain and give us her perspective.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for those questions. And as I hope you will appreciate, not just from today, but from our wider engagement over the recent months on this issue, we're really happy to engage with the challenging questions, and we definitely don't want to duck away with them. I don't think we would want to defend the position that we're in terms of the condition of chalk streams or our rivers more broadly. So we're really happy to engage in that challenging debate and absolutely recognise that progress has flatlined. So I'm just going to accept that point rather than trying to defend it. So I think there were some questions there about how can we be really convincing that government is going to take action, and about our record in taking action so far? And I think probably here, I hope that my colleague David Dangerfield's on the line from the Environment Agency, because he might want to pick up where I leave off. One of the particular questions that was asked was about enforcement in agriculture, and although we have water companies well represented here today, I think we would absolutely accept that water companies are only part of the picture, and that an absolutely key part of the picture is agricultural pollution, particularly for diffuse pollution into these water bodies. And we would absolutely agree with the need for effective enforcement, and our ministers, if they were here, would absolutely say that we have the opportunity on leaving the European Union to absolutely focus on what matters and make sure that we're delivering on the enforcement that has a real impact on the ground, rather than just delivering on what some farmers might see as paperwork. I think I think David might want to say more about what we've done in recent years, but I think one of the things that we would say is that the thing that we are aiming for is the improvements, not necessarily the number of prosecutions, which, although it's one metric, it's not the only metric and the only measure of success. And I think the Environment Agency would in particular point to the work that they've been trialling in Devon on advice-led enforcement, where an extensive set of enforcement activities with farmers that have been led through advice have delivered real improvements, real investment in practical things like slurry stores, and they've done that without the sanctions. So I would absolutely accept that there is more to do. Do we think we should have more money? I think anybody in any part of public service would like to have more money to play with and be able to do more than we can do. But we're all operating in constrained times, and we are doing what we can to deliver with the resources that are available to us. And part of that is not always about maximising the number of prosecutions, but about getting the right outcomes on the ground for that. I think the other thing that I would say on agriculture is that it's absolutely critical for us to make sure that what we do on the enforcement and regulation side goes absolutely hand in glove with the reform of the funding that we offer to farmers as we leave the European Union, and maximising what we get from the environmental land management system, where we think that water is going to be one of the absolutely key outcomes that we can get, and using the public money that we put into the farming system to deliver the public goods that it should. And so that's going to be an absolutely key focus. So in terms of delivering that step change and trying to address some of that scepticism, which I entirely understand, I would say that's another absolutely critical aspect for us. Is David on the line from the Environment Agency, and does he want to pick up on the enforcement points? I don't know how nimble we can be with our switching between speakers.
No, he's not on the panel.
Yeah, no, he's not on the panel, but it's David Dangerfield. I can let him talk.
I didn't mean to unwittingly put him on the spot, but he might want to join in.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Jolly good. Okay, well, thank you very much. Firstly, Harvey sends his apologies that he can't be here, and I hope you've got a sense of his personal commitment from the video clip that you saw earlier. For me, it's been a pleasure to be able to join you this morning, because one of the benefits for me is to hear the range of views that have been expressed this morning, and I'll come back and just reflect a little bit on that. In terms of agriculture specifically,
guys, we are running out of time, so can you please make it quite quick, please?
In terms of agriculture specifically, I think one of the challenges around agriculture is that we are dealing with diffuse pollution. I mean, in terms of the range of interventions that are available to us as the agency, of course, regulation and enforcement is an important part of that, and we will take action. We would always, look for more resources, to support our enforcement action, but we target our work on pollution incidents and where we can have the biggest impact. I think the broader opportunity is around catchment-based approaches, working with partners, which has been a really strong theme this morning, to improve the way in which catchments are managed holistically, including land management, dealing with issues like soil runoff, diffuse pollution. So
I'm sorry you've been cut off there. We do have to keep an eye on the clock, as I'm sure you'll understand, but thank you for that contribution. I've now got a question for Thames Water. We've had several questions come in for Thames. First of all, from Dr. Wendy Morrison, the project manager of Beacons of the Past. who asks, again, it's a rather challenging question, will Thames match Affinity Water's investment in this whole area? I hate to put you on the spot, Sarah or Yvette, whichever of you is going to answer. And Ashley Smith again has raised the issue of the spilling of untreated sewage, and the contention in the question is that Thames Water has challenged the Environment Agency's determination that spillages are in fact illegal. Perhaps you could just comment on that if you're able to, because that is quite a serious point.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Howe, and I'll try and keep it snappy because I'm clear about time. I guess on the first point around match funding, I'm not going to be my money is bigger than your money around all this. As I mentioned, we've got 40 million going into reducing abstraction on the chest. We've got 3 million going into the Smarter Water Catchment Initiative. I don't actually have a single figure sum, but I absolutely will make sure that the team get back to Wendy. And I just think on the sheer scale of Thames's reach versus some of the other water companies, I know that we're making a sizable investment. And I think what's more important actually is that we're doing it collaboratively with Affinity and other companies so that we work together. I think collaboration is key. I am not a legal expert, so I'm not going to dangerously go into that territory, but my firm belief is that the legalities are not the issue here. What we have to do is what's right for these rivers, what's right for the chalk streams, and what's right for society and the environment. And that's what I'm committed to do. So we are going to look at our programmes and make sure that we deal with these tricky problems that have been building up over years. And I guess a final thought, and Charles, I was very moved by the story of you and your pregnant wife, Vicky, having been driven around by my husband to some strange places in various pregnancies of mine. And I think we were all moved by that, frankly. And Tom, you mentioned just plain speaking. What is really clear to me is that we just need to use simple language. We need to get on with getting on, and we need to empower and work with local people who've got the answers to the problems. I had the joy of meeting Paul. I can't wait to see him again at the River Chess. And I think if big businesses like us can work together, work with government, work with the regulators, and help local people unlock those solutions, we can just get on with getting on. And hopefully the trout won't need driving around by Charles's children when they get to start a family.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I've got a question now about Philip Dunn's MP's private members bill. Guy Linley Adams and Elaine King of the Chiltern Conservation Board both asked questions about this. Will the panel, will the members of the panel, and I don't want to ask all the panel, support that private members bill, particularly insofar as it deals with storm overflows? Who would like to comment on that? I don't know whether Sally at DEFRA has a comment on that, on the government's position on the bill. Private members' bills are usually treated neutrally by government. It is for Parliament to decide, but perhaps Jake is another person who might like to comment on that. Who would like to go first on
I'm happy to leap in quickly as Sally. Just to explain the context, Affinity Water obviously is a water-only company, so isn't responsible for wastewater. So I'll leave that to wastewater colleagues. But the bill's really interesting and really supportive of the political focus on these issues. I think all people in water companies, I'm pretty new to the industry, but all people in water companies have spent a long time saying if only people would talk more about water, and finally we're doing it. So support it from that point of view wholeheartedly. But I'll leave it to wastewater colleagues and to Sally to talk about the more precise bits of the bill, perhaps.
Thank you. Shall I chip in there?
Thank you. Yes, that'd be great.
And thank you very much for that. So Ministers haven't yet responded formally to the bill and will do so at its second reading. So I won't preempt what ministers are going to say in terms of their formal response to the bill. But I think what Minister Pow would say if she was here is that it absolutely encapsulates the parliamentary interest and pressure that she's been talking about in terms of the interest of members across the House in these issues and their desires to see action taken. So I think whether or not government formally supports the bill, I think what you will see is that Minister Pow is absolutely committed to driving the action that is going to prevent these storm overflows, and particularly those which are most damaging to the environment. I think that we are all conscious that there is a very big job to do here, which is going to take a long time before we get to a position where these are a thing of the past. And what we're really keen to see in DEFRA is focusing on those which are doing the most damage to the environment right now and seeing immediate action to tackle those.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to have one very quick question. There's an interesting one from Dr. Wendy Morrison, who asks what is happening with the data generated by citizen scientists, volunteers who are measuring things like reference flow, river fly, populations, and so on. Her contention is it goes into, all this stuff goes into a generic black box and is piling up somewhere, and nobody's actually looking at it, and it's a missed opportunity. Is there anyone who'd like to talk about that volunteer effort and how the data can be harnessed rather better? Because as we've heard, monitoring is going to be key to going forward in a positive way. How can we deal with that? Has anyone on the
Lord
panel?
Howe, I mean, I'm not an expert at all, but I did see it in action. And Yvette, I don't know if you can post up, there's a website that we were with people from citizen scientists, the University of Queen Mary and Westfield, who are gathering that data together. And it's fascinating, actually, when you look at all the different inputs, how they're able to understand where on different points of the chalk stream different influences do. So, and I know that the team who are working on it would love to get some more amplification from this group in terms of the engagement of it. But that's exactly the type of initiative that I'm very keen to support around getting local people engaged with their local communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's fundamental to the Smarter Water Catchment Initiative. So I'll forward a link later that can be circulated to participants.
That's great. It's a challenge, I think, to most of our panel members, I think, to see what more we can do with the data that is out there. Well, the clock is against us. May I just say that I've got a lot of other questions that have been fed in. What we're going to do is publish those on the website with as good answers as we can muster from the panel members, so that no questioner will feel hard done by, I hope. But perhaps I could just sum up by thanking everybody once again. We heard from Harvey Bradshaw that there are reasons to be cheerful, and his reasons are that we know what needs to be done. We have commitment from the top down, which is great. We have strong relationships already in place, and a lot has already been done. So the task ahead, I suggest, rests on those four pillars which the Minister articulated. Water abstraction management and having a good abstraction plan, reduction of waste and leakage, particularly in the areas she spoke about, reduction in water consumption by consumers, and a focus on water quality, a reduction in pollution, and giving muscle to the task force on sewage discharges in particular. And Doug Kennedy got it absolutely right when he said that all of this depends on good communication. It depends on stakeholders talking to each other at the right level of seniority. And what we are now seeing with Charles taking over from Doug, and all success to his elbow, if I may say, is that this is translated into a national effort. So I wish all participants every success in that endeavour, and thank them in advance for what they are going to do for us all and for our chalk streams throughout the country. Thank you all very much.